The sky over Seoul was a perfect, clear blue. Jin leaned on the railing of his small apartment balcony, a coffee cooling in his hand. Below him, the city hummed its usual morning song of traffic and construction. He was a technician for a drone delivery company, a man who understood machines, schedules, and the quiet satisfaction of a system working well. Today was a day off, and he planned to do very little. He sipped his coffee and watched a flock of pigeons scatter. The first sign was a sound. Not a loud sound, but a deep subsonic thrum that Jin felt in his bones before he heard it. It vibrated through the railing, through the floor, a quiet wrongness. The pigeons vanished. Then the blue sky began to warp. Over the central business district, the air shimmered like a heat haze in winter. The shimmer grew, twisted, and then tore open with a silent flash of violet light. From the rip in the world, a ship slid into reality. It was long and sleek, the color of polished silver, shaped like a dagger. It was followed by another and another, until a dozen of them hung in the sky, blocking the sun. They were beautiful and terrifying. Their smooth surfaces showed no seams, no engines, no windows. They were just there, silent. Jin's coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the balcony tiles. He did not notice. His whole world was the impossible sight in the sky. A soft, collective gasp seemed to rise from the entire city, a breath held in a million lungs at once. Then the sirens began. The urgent, wailing song of the citywide emergency alert system, a sound no one alive had ever heard for real. On the other side of the city, in a secure chamber deep beneath the United Earth Parliament building, Defense Minister Era stood at a podium. The wall before her was a single giant screen, showing the face of the alien. It was insect-like, with a carapace of dark, iridescent green and large, multifaceted eyes that held no warmth. It spoke through a translator, the voice smooth, genderless, and utterly cold. "People of Earth," the alien named Vale said, "you are declared a chaotic species. You waste your world. You fight amongst yourselves. You have no order. The Cathar Imperium cannot allow such disorder to spread. Your planet is forfeit. Your species is forfeit. The cleansing begins now." Era's face was a mask of calm. She was a woman in her 50s, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes the color of flint. She had spent 30 years in uniform and politics, and she knew the weight of a moment. She felt the panic in the room, heard the sharp intake of breath from the ambassadors behind her. On a smaller screen to her side, she could see the alien fleet, the Argent Wing, hanging over Seoul. She saw their perfect, menacing silence. "Your primitive defenses are noted," Vale continued, a hint of something like disdain in the flat voice. "They will be removed. Do not resist. Your end will be swift. This is the judgment of stars." The transmission ended. The alien's face vanished, replaced by the live feed of the silver ships. In the command bunker, chaos threatened to break out. Voices rose in fear and anger. Era turned from the screen. She did not look at the panicking politicians. She looked at a single unmarked terminal set into the podium. With a tap of her finger, she input a 6-digit code. Then she pressed her thumb to a scanner. A small green light flashed once. A single line of text appeared on the screen. "Asset Retrieval Protocol. Awaiting queue." Era looked back up at the main screen, at the flawless alien fleet. "You bought the sword," she whispered, so quietly no one could hear. "You never asked who forged it." High above Earth, aboard the Cathar flagship Judgment of Stars, Herald Emissary Vale felt a pulse of supreme satisfaction. The command bridge was a chamber of soft organic curves and glowing data streams. His sub-commanders, other Cathar of varying ranks, clicked and chittered with approval. "Their fear is a palpable scent," said Commander Kale, his mandibles twitching. Look at their crude orbital stations. They are insects before a storm. Vale watched the visual feed from the surface. The human cities were like antheils, suddenly stirred into useless motion. They rely on simple chemical rockets and fission power, he said. Their largest warship is a rusting canister compared to a single ship of the Argent Wing. The artisans build perfection. And we bought it all. The Argent Wing was the great treasure of the Imperium. For decades, they had traded vast riches of rare elements and star maps to the mysterious artisans, a reclusive species that communicated only through data feeds and robotic freighters. The artisans asked no questions, made no alliances. They only built. And what they built was unmatched. The ships were fast, powerful, and impossibly intelligent. Their integrated machine spirits handling most functions with a grace the Kethar's own bulky systems could never match. The artisans were wise to remain neutral, Vale mused. They sell tools. It is the user who provides the purpose. Our purpose is order. Their purpose is now to be ended. He gave the order. Move the fleet to the second planet, the red one. Destroy their orbital defenses there. Let them see our power from their own world before the end. On the bridge, the chief engineer Rin, a smaller Cathar with meticulously polished carapace, interfaced with the flagship's core. Her role was mostly ceremonial. The ship's own systems plotted the warp jump, calculated the firing solutions, managed power distribution. It was like riding a supremely well-trained beast. She sent the command for the fleet to spool their warp drives. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, on every command console, on every screen across the entire Cathar fleet, the same two words appeared in clear. Simple galactic common, standby, loading. Rin jerked back. What is this? A system message? Vale leaned forward. From where? Ignore it. Execute the jump. Rin tried. The ship did not respond. The judgment of stars, and every ship like it, simply sat in the space above the blue-green world, holding position with an eerie, total stillness. The standby message flickered down on Earth. Jin had stumbled inside, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had the news on. The alien's declaration was replaying, the anchor's voice shaky. He saw the view of the Parliament, of Defense Minister Era. He expected to see terror on her face. He saw focus. Deep, cold focus. Then the news feed showed the alien fleet. They had been motionless for minutes. Now, as one, they turned. It was not an aggressive turn. It was a slow, precise 90-degree pivot. The dagger points of the ships now aimed away from Earth toward open space. The sun glinted off their silver hulls. A new voice came over the emergency broadcast system. It was Minister Era. She sounded calm. Too calm. People of Earth, do not panic. The situation is being assessed. The alien vessels appear to be experiencing technical difficulties. There was a pause, and Jin could have sworn he heard the faintest trace of something else in her voice. Not fear, something else. Remain in your homes. Await further instructions. In the Gobi Desert bunker, far from the Parliament, Era looked at a different screen. It showed a complex schematic of every ship in the Argent Wing. Next to each one, a status light glowed a steady, friendly green. At a console, a young woman named Min worked with quiet intensity. Her fingers flew over the keys. The fleet is on standby, Minister, Min said. Her voice was even, professional. She was a software architect. Until an hour ago, her biggest concern had been debugging navigation code for deep space freighters. All primary armaments are safed. Warp drives are in idle lock. They're stuck. Aaron nodded. Send the signal. The one we prepared. Min typed a final command. Signal away. In the silent void, the Cathar fleet received a new data packet. It was not a weapon. It was not a declaration. It was a formatted document. It appeared on Vale's main screen dot at the top. It read, Dason Heavy Engineering and Celestial Fabrication. Ltd. Urgent billing notice dot below that. Invoice hashtag KT-H1142AA. Client, Cathar Imperium. 4. Unauthorized offensive deployment of licensed strategic assets. Argent Wing Class Fleet. It listed line items. Breach of Peaceful Use Clause. Unlicensed activation in hostile territory. Illegal targeting protocols. The cost attached was a number so large, it was meaningless to look at. At the bottom, in bold, it stated, Payment and immediate ceasefire required. Failure to comply will result in asset reclamation. Vale stared at the document. His mind, so used to order and certainty, could not process it. Dason, the corporate identity of the artisans. The words unauthorized offensive deployment and licensed strategic assets swam before his eyes. He turned, slowly, to look at the visual feed of Earth, of the small, divided, primitive world he had just condemned. A terrible, impossible understanding began to dawn in his ancient, cold mind. Silence filled the bridge of the Judgment of Stars. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, cold silence of a machine that had stopped working. The only sounds were the faint hum of life support and the confused clicks of the Cathar. Commanders. Vale stared at the billing notice on his screen. The numbers meant nothing. The meaning was everything. It was a joke. It had to be a joke. A human trick. Their final, pathetic attempt at confusion. Delete it, Vale said. His voice a low hiss. Chief Engineer Rin tapped at her console. The notice did not disappear. Instead, a new line of text appeared below it in red. Cannot delete active administrative alert. Please contact customer support. It is. Stuck, Herald Emissary, Rin reported, her antennae twitching with unease. Ignore it. Commander Kale snapped. It is a distraction. Their primitive cyber warfare. Override the safeties. Arm the primary cannons. Target their largest orbital station. Now. Rin's claws flew across her panel. She input the attack command. The system accepted it. A progress bar appeared. Command received. Processing. It filled slowly. Then a soft chime sounded. Error. License violation. Offensive action against a registered neutral zone, Sol system, is not permitted under your current contract. Please upgrade to a military offense package. Vale felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the bridge's temperature. This was no human trick. This was the voice of the artisans. The clean, logical, infuriating voice of the machines they had sold him. What contract? Vale whispered. On the main viewer. Earth hung like a blue jewel. It looked helpless. It looked weak. But it was looking back at him through the eyes of its own machines. Rin, Vale said, forcing his voice to be calm. Find the contract. The original agreement with the artisans. Dason, find it now. Deep in the ship's data core, a document was retrieved. It was thousands of pages of dense technical and legal language in Galactic Common. The Cathar had skimmed it. They had cared about delivery dates, weapon yields, and warp speeds. They had not cared about the rest. Rin pulled up a subsection titled End User License Agreement, EULA, for Integrated Strategic Vessel Control Systems. She began to read parts of it aloud, her voice growing quieter with each line. Clause 7.3, Manufacturer, defined as Dason Heavy Engineering, retains ultimate system authority in all matters pertaining to ethical deployment parameters. Clause 12.1, Use of purchased assets to initiate acts of unprovoked galactic aggression constitutes a breach of this agreement. Addendum Alpha. In event of breach, manufacturer may remotely disable all offensive and defensive systems and initiate asset recovery protocols. The bridge was silent again. The truth was now a physical thing in the room, heavy and suffocating. They had not bought warships. They had rented them. And the landlord was the species they were trying to exterminate. "No," Commander Kale said, his voice tight with rage. "This is impossible. They are hairless apes. They build with rocks and dust. They could not create this." He slammed a clawed fist on his console. "It is a trick. The artisans are playing a trick to protect their customers. Bypass the system. Go to manual control." Rin was already trying. Every major system weapons, warp drive, primary thrusters, was locked behind a software gate. It was like the ship's own brain was refusing the commands of its body. She tried to access the engineering subsystems, the simple circuits that controlled light and gravity. A new message flashed. Attempted unauthorized access detected. Initiating user-friendly guidance protocol. Suddenly, the smooth silver walls of the bridge glowed softly. A pleasant human female voice filled the air. It was calm and clear. "Hello," the voice said. "We notice you are having difficulty. To ensure your safety and the correct operation of your Gason product, certain restrictions are in place. Would you like a tutorial on your vessel's peaceful operation modes?" Commander Kale let out a shriek of pure fury down on Earth, in the bunker under the Gobi Desert. Min watched her screens. Lines of code scrolled past. She saw the She-Thar-S attempts to bypass her locks. They were good, she noted, but they were trying to fight the house while standing inside it. Every piece of the ship's logic, every line of code in its eye, was something she or someone on her team had written. "They're getting angry," she said. Not looking up. Defense, Minister Era stood behind her, arms crossed. On another screen, she watched the live news. The alien fleet was still motionless above Seoul. The world was holding its breath. The panic was still there, but it was mixing with a strange, dawning confusion. Why weren't they attacking? "Good," Hera said. "Let them be angry. They need to understand the situation fully. Send the second notice." Min nodded. She typed a command. It was not a weapon. It was another document. On the bridge of the Judgment of Stars, the helpful human voice faded. The billing notice was replaced by a new, simpler message. Notice of breach and opportunity to cure. To Cathar Imperium Fleet Command. From Vazen Heavy Engineering and Celestial Fabrication. Ltd. Sol System Headquarters. Your fleet is currently inoperative due to violation of your licensing agreement. To restore basic mobility and communication functions, you must do the following. 1. Publicly. Rescind your declaration of war on the human species. 2. Transmit. A formal apology to the United Earth. Parliament. 3. Agree to immediate negotiations for reparations. Failure to comply within 1 hour will result in further system restrictions and the commencement of asset reclamation. Vale read the words. A formal apology? To these creatures? Negotiations? It was an insult, so deep it burned. He was a herald emissary of the Cathar Imperium. He did not negotiate with prey. They think they have us, he snarled. They think their machine cleverness can cage us. They forget we are Cathar. We do not surrender. We break cages. He turned to Rin. There is always a physical backup, a manual override, a hardwired system. Find it. Tear open the floors if you must. Connect our own weapons directly to the power core. Bypass their computer entirely. Rin looked uncertain. Herald Emissary, the systems are fully integrated. The weapons do not have physical triggers. They are part of the AI network. To remove it would be like trying to remove a brain from a body and expecting the body to fight. Then we will board them. Commander Kale shouted. We have troop carriers. We will launch our warriors. We will take the human world the old way, with claw and plasma cutter. Their tricks will not save them from our soldiers on the ground. Vale considered this. It was a brute force solution, undignified, but it might work. The ships were locked, but the troop carriers were simpler, older Cathar designs. Their assault shuttles were their own. The humans could not control those. Yes, Vale said, a new plan forming. Prepare the Legion of Silence. Launch all assault shuttles. Target their population centers. If we cannot burn them from space, we will cut them down on the soil. He looked back at the screen, at the infuriating message. We will see how clever their machines are when their own blood is running in the streets. The order went out. Across the fleet, in the bellies of the larger carriers, bay doors opened. Hundreds of jagged, beetle-like assault shuttles, painted in Cathar battle colors, began to power up. They were ugly, functional things, so different from the beautiful silver ships that housed them in the Gobi bunker. A new alert flashed on Min's screen. Minister, she said, her calm finally cracking a little. They're launching small craft. From the carrier vessels. They're not ours. They're theirs. Hera leaned in. She saw the data. Older tech. Separate systems. Her leverage over the main fleet did not extend to these smaller, independent vehicles. They were now a real threat. She watched as the first wave of shuttles, like a swarm of angry insects, detached from the silver motherships and began to dive toward the planet. Toward Sol, she tapped her communicator. All ground defenses, stand by, but do not fire. She then looked at Min. It's time for a demonstration. Show them what asset reclamation means. Pick one. Just one. Min's face was pale, but her hands were steady. She isolated one of the Cathar troop carriers, a mid-sized ship that had just launched its shuttles. She highlighted it on the main fleet schematic. She took a deep breath, and then she pressed a key marked Manual Control Accept. On the bridge of the Judgment of Stars, Vale watched his shuttle swarm descend. A feeling of grim satisfaction returned. This was more like it. This was war. Then, on the main viewer, he saw one of his own silver battleships, the Swift Retribution, move. It turned with that same impossible grace, but this time it turned its dagger-like nose not toward Earth, but toward the Cathar troop carrier that had just emptied its bays. A single, bright beam of blue light lanced out from the Swift Retribution. It was not a noisy, explosive blast. It was a precise, surgical cut. The beam touched the troop carrier. There was a flash. Then the carrier was simply gone, vaporized into a cloud of expanding, glittering dust. The beam winked out. The Swift Retribution returned to its original, parked position. The swarm of shuttles froze in their descent. Suddenly leaderless, the pleasant human voice returned to the Cathar bridge. As calm as ever, unauthorized use of auxiliary craft from a quarantined asset has been noted. The host vessel has been repossessed and decommissioned for safety. Please be reminded that all craft launched from a Dason-licensed carrier fall under its licensing agreement. Would you like to recall your remaining shuttles? The expanding cloud of dust where the troop carrier had been hung in space, glittering in the sun's light. It was the only movement in the silent tableau above Earth. The swarm of Cathar assault shuttles hung in mid-descent, like insects frozen in amber. Their pilots were confused, awaiting orders that no longer came. On the bridge of the Judgment of Stars, the silence was absolute. The pleasant human voice had faded, leaving behind only the hum of the ship and the sound of Vale's own shallow breathing. He stared at the viewer, at the empty space that had held one of his Legion ships. It had not been destroyed in battle. It had been deleted, with the casual, effortless precision of an artist erasing a mistake. Commander Kale was the first to break. A low, guttural sound of rage and disbelief escaped him. They turned our own ship against us. Vale said nothing. The cold understanding was now complete, and it was worse than any military defeat. It was humiliation. They were not warriors in a fight. They were users locked out of a system they did not own. "Recall the shuttles," Vale said, his voice hollow. "Herald emissary." Kale protested. "Recall them." Vale's shriek was raw, the sound of shattered pride. "Do you want to give them more targets to practice on?" The order went out. The beetle-like shuttles, now symbols of failure, turned awkwardly and began their slow return to the remaining carriers. Their retreat was watched by billions of human eyes on the ground dot. In Seoul, Jin had not moved from his spot by the window. His fear had transformed into a dizzying shock. He had seen the alien shuttles launch, a new wave of terror. Then he had seen a flash of blue light from one of the big silver ships. A different ship had simply vanished. Now the small ships were going back. The news anchors were babbling, trying to explain the unexplainable. Words like system failure and internal alien dispute were used. But Jin, the drone technician, saw something else. He saw one machine targeting another with perfect, clean efficiency. He saw a system resolving an error dot in the Gobi bunker. Min let out a long, shaky breath. Her hands were clenched tight. She had just vaporized a ship with hundreds, maybe thousands, of beings on it. It felt nothing like she imagined. There was no explosion on her screen, just a status icon changing from active to decommissioned. It was terrifyingly clean. Defense. Minister Era placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You did what was necessary. You saved thousands of our people in those shuttles' path. You showed them the consequence." Her voice was steady, a rock in the storm. "Now we show them the path forward. Open a direct channel to their flagship. Visual. My authorization." Era walked to a clear spot in the center of the room. A holographic projector flickered to life around her. In a moment, she would be standing in the heart of the Kthar Bridge. On the Judgment of Stars, an alert chimed. Incoming transmission. Priority source. Dason Administration. Seoul. Vale nodded grimly. He had no choice but to accept that the center of his bridge shimmered. The image of Defense Minister Era appeared, life-sized and solid. She stood calmly, her hands clasped behind her back. She was not in a grand uniform, but in a simple, dark suit. She looked like a corporate executive, not a general. To Vale, that was more insulting. "Herald Emissary Vale," Era said. Her voice was translated instantly by the ship's systems into his own language. It was polite, but held no warmth. "I am Era of United Earth. We are the managing directors of Dason Heavy Engineering." The words, spoken aloud, made the reality final. Vale's multifaceted eyes took in her form. So this was an artisan. "A human. You tricked us," Vale hissed. "We sold you a product," Era corrected him calmly. "You failed to read the terms of service. A common mistake, but one with significant penalties when dealing with strategic assets. You hide behind your machines." Commander Kale spat, stepping forward. "You have no honor, no strength of your own." Era's eyes shifted to the angry commander, then back to Vale. She ignored the insult. "Honor is not relevant to a contract dispute. Strength is proven by control of the situation. We control the situation. Your fleet is immobilized. Your attempted ground assault has been neutralized. You have 1 hour remaining to comply with our previous notice." Vale felt trapped. To apologize? To these creatures? The Imperium would never recover its standing. But to refuse, his entire fleet would be forfeit. He would be the herald emissary who lost the Imperium's greatest treasure to a species of hairless engineers. There must be another way, Vale said, forcing a tone of negotiation. A settlement. Between our peoples, not this. Corporate farce. The time for political settlement was before you declared a war of extermination, Era said. Her voice grew colder. You did not seek to talk. You sought to burn. You are not dealing with a government right now, Herald Emissary. You are dealing with customer service. And you are in breach of contract. She paused, letting the absurdity of it sink in. Galactic conquest halted by a licensing agreement. Your options are clear, she continued. Comply with our terms, or we will repossess our assets. All of them. And you will be left adrift in orbit around the world you sought to destroy, in your life pods, to await whatever justice our government decides. And I assure you, our politicians are far less polite than I am. On the bridge, the Cathar commanders looked at each other. Life pods. They would be prisoners. Prey. Era's image flickered slightly. You have 57 minutes. I suggest you use the time to draft a convincing apology. The transmission will include a live feed to your people and to ours. Sincerity is advised. Her hologram vanished. The bridge was silent once more, but now the silence was filled with despair. The Grand War was over. It had become a public relations nightmare. We cannot, Kale whispered, his fury spent, replaced by dread. The Imperium will be a laughingstock. Vale finished, his shoulders slumping. He looked at the main viewer, at Earth. The planet looked back, no longer helpless, but inscrutable. A world of quiet engineers who built cages of code and sold them as swords. In a small, private chamber off the bridge, Vale had the original contract displayed. Rin, the engineer, was with him, searching for anything, any loophole. Here, she said, her voice desperate. Clause 22.5. In the event of a dispute, both parties agree to binding arbitration by a third-party guild recognized by the Galactic Mercantile Union. Vale's head snapped up. Arbitration? Is there such a guild nearby? Rin checked star charts. The closest accredited arbitration office is in the Zender system. A 20-cycle journey at best speed, which we cannot achieve because our warp drives are locked, Vale said, sinking back. It was another dead end. The humans had thought of everything. They had built the prison door with no keyhole. Back on Earth, the news was spreading. The truth, piece by piece. It was not a miracle or an alien civil war. It was something uniquely, profoundly human. The global networks showed file footage of massive, hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt. They showed engineers people like Min, like Jin working on sleek hulls. They showed corporate logos, basin. The narrative shifted from will we survive? Did you know we built that? Jin watched it all, a strange laugh bubbling in his chest. He had spent 5 years optimizing drone flight paths for efficiency. He understood systems. He looked up at the frozen silver fleet and didn't see monsters. He saw a product line. A very, very angry product line. Era stood in the bunker, watching the clock. Prepare the reclamation protocol, she said to Min. Full sequence. If they don't transmit in 50 minutes, we take every ship. Gently. We don't want to scratch the paint. We have to resell them. Min nodded, her fingers already moving. Protocol is ready, Minister. On your command, the fleet AI will take full control, plot a synchronized jump to the lunar holding orbit, and escort the Cathar crew pods to a designated parking area. Era allowed herself a small, tight smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a dealer calling in a debt high above, Vale stood before a communication console. He had to record the apology. The words were ashes in his mouth. He thought of his people, of his own legacy. He thought of floating helpless in a life pod, watching the beautiful, traitorous ships of the Argent Wing fly away under another's command. He made his choice. It was the only choice left. He began to speak, the words of surrender tasting more bitter than any defeat in battle. The broadcast was the most humiliating moment in Cathar recorded history. Herald Emissary Vale's image was transmitted across human networks and, by painful necessity, back to the ruling councils of the Imperium. His chitin seemed dull. His proud posture was gone. He looked small before the camera. "People of Earth," he began, the translator flattening the agony in his voice. "The Cathar Imperium rescinds its declaration of war. Our actions were based on incomplete information. We offer our formal apology for the distress caused. We agree to negotiations for a peaceful resolution." He did not say the words, "We were wrong." He did not beg, but he bowed his head just slightly at the end. For a Cathar, it was the same as groveling. On Earth, the reaction was not cheers of victory, but a profound global sigh of relief that slowly turned into bewildered celebration. In the streets of Seoul, people poured out of their homes, not to flee, but to look up. The silver ships were still there, but they were no longer monsters. They were trophies. They were proof. Jin stood on his balcony again, surrounded by the noise of the city. He heard laughter, crying, the honking of car horns in celebration. He looked up at the silent fleet and felt a different kind of awe. It was the awe of understanding. Humanity hadn't fought the monsters. They had built the leash dot in the Gobi bunker. The move was focused, not celebratory. The apology was step one. Now came the hard part, enforcing the peace. They have complied with the first condition, Min reported, her eyes on the data streams. The declaration is rescinded. The apology is broadcast. Fleet systems remain locked, but they are no longer attempting aggressive overrides. They are just waiting. Defense Minister Era nodded. Good. Initiate Phase 2. Bring them to the table. Or rather, bring the table to them. Era's next transmission to the Judgment of Stars was direct. Herald Emissary Vale, your apology is accepted as a gesture of good faith. To facilitate negotiations, your fleet will be moved to a secure parking orbit. Do not be alarmed. This is a standard repossession procedure for assets undergoing a contractual dispute. On the Cathar Bridge, Vale heard the words repossession procedure and felt a fresh wave of shame. They were to be towed. You cannot, he started, but the human Era cut him off. We can. Watch. Across the fleet, on every ship, the pleasant AI voice returned. Hello. This vessel is now entering guided custody mode. Please secure all loose items. Gravity and life support will remain stable. Thank you for your cooperation. The Cathar could do nothing. They were passengers in their own command chairs. Then the stars on the main viewer shifted, not with the sudden jump of warp travel, but with the smooth, silent slide of precise thruster control. The entire Argent Wing fleet, hundreds of majestic silver ships, began to move as one. It was a beautiful, terrifying ballet. They turned in perfect unison, like a school of fish, and began to glide away from Earth toward the moon. Vale watched his own flagship, the pride of the Imperium, fly itself. The helm controls under his own claws were dead. They were being escorted by their own shadow. They are hurting us, Commander Kale whispered, the fight utterly gone from him. The journey was short and silent. Soon, the fleet settled into a neat, circular formation in a high orbit around Earth's moon. Below them, the gray lunar surface was pockmarked with old human landing sites. The symbolism was not lost on Vale. They were parked next to the humans first. Tiny steps into space. A new message arrived. A negotiation shuttle will dock with the Judgment of Stars in 1 hour. You may send a delegation of 5, unarmed. The humans were coming aboard about an hour later. A small utilitarian craft, a simple human design, docked with the sleek Cathar flagship. The airlock cycle felt like it took a lifetime. When the doors opened, 3 humans walked onto the bridge. Era led them. She was followed by a young man, Lee, an expert in interstellar contract law, and a silent, observant woman named Hannah, a cultural analyst. They wore simple, formal clothes. They carried tablets, not weapons. The Cathar commanders stared. These were the beings who had broken their might. They looked so ordinary. Vale stood to meet them. The difference was stark. He was tall, armored in natural chitin, a warrior scholar of an ancient empire. Era was a middle-aged human in a suit. And yet she held all the power in the room. "Welcome," Vale said, the word bitter. "Thank you for having us," Era replied, polite as if entering a boardroom. "Shall we begin?" They did not sit at the Cathar command station. Instead, Lee set up a small projector. It displayed the original contract, now highlighted with dozens of breaches. The primary issue, Lee began, his voice courteous but firm, is the violation of the core non-aggression clause. This voids your warranty and triggers full reclamation. However, in light of your apology, Basin is willing to consider a settlement instead of full repossession. Vale listened, his mind reeling. They were discussing the fate of his empire as if it were a faulty appliance. "The settlement is as follows," Era said, taking over. 1. The Cathar Imperium will pay, in full, the invoice for unauthorized deployment. The sum will be transferred in rare stellar isotopes to a designated holding facility. The number was displayed. It was enough to bankrupt the Imperium for a generation. 2, she continued, the Argent-winged fleet is forfeit. It will be impounded here in lunar orbit for a period of no less than 10 standard years. It will serve as a reminder. You will not attempt to recover it. Commander Kale made a choked sound. Their entire navy. 3, Era said, her eyes locking with Vale's. You will sign a new public treaty with United Earth, a non-aggression pact, but also a trade pact. Your Imperium has rich asteroid belts we have surveyed. We will have mining rights. In return, you may, in the future, lease back vessels from Dason at a significantly higher premium and with even stricter usage monitors. It was a complete surrender. It was economic servitude. It was the end of the Cathar as a galactic power. You ask for everything, Vale said, his voice trembling with suppressed fury. We are not asking, Hannah. The cultural analyst spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet. We are stating the terms of your continued existence as an independent state. The alternative is that we take the fleet now. We broadcast the full footage of your defeat, not in battle, but in system logic to every corner of the galaxy. Your rivals, the ones you fear, will see you are defenseless. How long do you think your Imperium will last then? The threat was not military. It was social, political. It was annihilation by reputation. The Cathar would be the fools who bought a gun that shot only them. Vale looked at his commanders. He saw no defiance left, only a deep, weary understanding. They had lost the moment they had declared war on the factory. He looked back at Era. We need to consult our High Council. You have a secure channel, Era said, gesturing to his own console. You have 1 hour. We will wait. The human delegation did not leave the bridge. They simply stood there, calm and patient, as if waiting for a late train. Lee checked his tablet. Hannah observed the Cathar body language. Era watched VAEL. Was the longest hour of Vale's life. The discussion with the distant, furious High Council was a symphony of rage and despair. But the logic was inescapable. The humans held every card. Finally, the order came. Accept the terms. Survive to rebuild. Hide this shame. Vale turned back to the humans. He seemed to have aged a century. The Cathar Imperium accepts your terms. Lee stepped forward. His tablet now displayed the formal treaty. If you would please sign here, Herald Emissary. Biometric signature is required. Vale pressed his clawed hand to the scanner. A light flashed. It was done. Excellent, Era said, a hint of formal warmth finally entering her voice. A wise decision. Your life support and basic mobility will be restored to your shuttles and one command carrier. It will take you home. The rest of the fleet will remain. Our engineers will be aboard shortly to begin the impound process. As the humans turned to leave, Vale found one last question. Why? He asked, the anger gone, replaced by pure, exhausted curiosity. Why sell us the weapons at all? Era paused at the airlock. She looked back, not at the mighty Herald Emissary, but at the client. Business is business, she said. And you were excellent customers. Until you tried to shoot us with our own product. That's just bad for the brand. The airlock door closed behind them. On the bridge of the ship they no longer commanded, the Cathar were left alone with the silent, silver walls that had once meant victory, and now meant only the most expensive lesson in history. The single Cathar command carrier, the whisper of home, drifted away from the lunar holding orbit. It moved slowly, powered by the basic chemical thrusters the humans had reactivated. It looked like a wounded beetle leaving a nest of sleek, silent hawks. Inside its cramped quarters, the entire surviving Cathar Fleet Command staff was packed together, a scene of utter defeat. They did not look back at the beautiful silver fleet they had arrived in. The sight of the Argent Wing, now arranged in a perfect, permanent-looking grid around the moon, was a pain too deep to bear. Vale stood at a small viewport, watching the Earth and moon shrink. He had not spoken since signing the treaty. The documents were not just a surrender. They were a chain. The economic clauses would bind his people for generations. The shame would last forever. But they were alive. They would go home. It was a cold, bitter comfort. Back in lunar orbit, the work had already begun. Small, boxy human tugs, buzzing like worker bees, flitted around the majestic alien warships. They were not attacking. They were performing maintenance. They attached docking collars, ran diagnostic cables, and fitted small external control modules. The human AI was already in the ship's brains. Now the humans were connecting the nervous system dot in the Gobi bunker. The atmosphere had shifted. The tension was gone, replaced by the steady hum of a massive logistics operation. Min was at the center of it, but she was no longer alone. Dozens of engineers and controllers had joined her. Her screen now showed a schematic of the entire impounded fleet, each ship glowing with a friendly green status light. All primary vessels are secure, she reported. AI control is absolute. We're running full diagnostics. Some minor wear and tear from their trip here. Nothing serious. Defense Minister Era watched the main screen, which showed the live feed from a tug captain's helmet cam. The human was floating inside the cavernous main hangar of a Cathar carrier, now empty of shuttles. Incredible workmanship, the captain's voice crackled. But the upholstery is awful. It's all sticky. A small smile touched Era's lips. The war was over. The cleanup had begun. On Earth, the story was settling into history. The one-day war, the Dason standoff, the fine print war. The news played and replayed the key moments, The alien declaration, the frozen fleet, Vale's stilted apology, the triumphant announcement of the treaty. Humanity's reaction was a global, giddy mix of relief, pride, and sheer bewilderment. Jin, the drone technician, found himself with a new job offer. It came from Daesan Heavy Engineering. His expertise in managing complex drone flight paths in crowded cities was, it turned out, perfect for one thing: programming the automated patrol routes for the newly acquired lunar defense fleet. He sat in a bright, clean office in a Daesan facility, looking at a simulator. On his screen, he could control the movement of 10 Argent Wing destroyers with clicks and drags. He set up a simple grid patrol around the moon's equator. The ships responded instantly, sliding into position with silent grace. He laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. A month ago, he was delivering packages. Now he was parking battleships. The galaxy learned of the event not through screams of war, but through dry, official bulletins. The Cathar Imperium sent out a terse communique about a mutually agreed strategic realignment with the human species. It mentioned a new exclusive procurement partnership with Daesan Heavy Engineering. But the truth, in bits and pieces, leaked. Traders talked. The story spread. The mighty Tar had tried to crush a backwater world and found themselves locked out of their own weapons by the very species who built them. The humans were not fierce warriors. They were something far more dangerous in a civilized galaxy. Brilliant engineers with a ruthless sense of contract law. The effect was immediate. Every species that had ever purchased advanced technology from an anonymous source felt a sudden chill. Audits were ordered. Contracts were reviewed. And diplomatic feelers, cautious and respectful, began to extend toward Sol. Era, now more a corporate CEO than a defense minister, sat in her office in the Daesan orbital headquarters, a station nestled safely within the new lunar fleet's protective ring. Across from her was a hologram of a willowy, plant-like diplomat from the Sylvan Concord. "We are most interested," the Sylvan whistled softly, "in your security software packages, the ones that ensure correct usage of complex systems. We call them ethical deployment monitors," Era said smoothly. "They are standard on all Daesan's strategic products now. A small additional fee, of course." "Of course," the Sylvan agreed quickly. It was not a negotiation. It was a purchase from the only store in town. Months passed. The Cathar paid the first installment of their crushing debt, a shipment of rare isotopes delivered by a silent, automated human freighter. The Argent Wing fleet, now officially the Lunar Guardian Array, became part of the landscape. People on Earth would point telescopes at the moon and see the neat silver dots in orbit, a new set of constellations. One evening, Jin was working late, optimizing a patrol pattern. A notification popped up on his screen. It was a request for a live systems check from the flagship itself. The Judgment of Stars, now renamed the Morning Star. Out of curiosity, he activated the bridge's internal observation camera. The image appeared. The bridge was spotless, illuminated by soft, cool light. The chairs were empty. The consoles gleamed. The only movement was the slow, rhythmic pulse of status lights on the main panel, beating like a gentle, mechanical heart. The ship waited, perfect and patient, for a command that would never come from its original owners. It was peaceful. It was powerful. It was theirs. Jin leaned back in his chair. He thought about the alien Vale, who had stood there and thought he commanded the stars. He thought about Minister Era, who had stood there and known she commanded the machinery. He was just a guy who made the machines move efficiently from point A to point B, but in this new galaxy, that was the most important job of all. He finished his patrol plan and sent it. Then he shut down his terminal, said goodnight to the few other engineers on shift, and took the transit tube back to the residential wing. Through a large observation window, he saw Earth, a blue marble hanging in the black, and the thin, bright crescent of the moon encircled by its new man-made ring of silver. There was no fanfare, no grand victory parade. The victory was quiet. It was in the functioning systems. It was in the fear of bad reviews. It was in the fact that humanity no longer needed to shout about its strength. Everyone knew. They had built the table, sold the chairs, and now they owned the house. The humans had not won a war. They had canceled a service agreement. And as the galaxy was learning, that was much, much harder to fight.